Picture the last time you bought glasses. You walk into the shop. You try on a few pairs, a Ray-Ban, maybe an Oakley, something with a fashion label on the side that costs a bit more and makes you feel sophisticated. You compare them. You pick the ones that suit you. You hand over 200-300 pounds, and you walk out feeling like you made a choice. Here's the thing I want you to sit with for the next 10 minutes. You almost certainly didn't, because the Ray-Ban, the Oakley, the posh fashion pair, the shop you stood in, the website you checked the night before, and, this is the part that gets strange, quite possibly the optician who tested your eyes, all trace back to the same place. One company, from a small town in northern Italy, that most people have never heard of. It's one of the most complete, quiet takeovers of an everyday product that has ever happened. And it was built, deliberately, over 60 years, by a man who started with nothing. So here's what I want to answer. How does one company end up owning almost every glasses brand you can name, without you ever noticing you had no real choice? It starts, oddly enough, in an orphanage. His name was Leonardo Del Vecchio. Born in Milan in 1935. His mother couldn't afford to keep him, so he grew up in an orphanage. No money, no connections. At 14, he took a job in a factory making metal parts, including small parts for spectacle frames. And this is where most versions of this story would end. A working-class kid making bits of metal. But Del Vecchio noticed something about the eyewear business that nobody was acting on. In the 1960s, it was completely fragmented. Hundreds of little firms making frames. Hundreds of separate shops selling them. Nobody owned more than their own small piece. And Del Vecchio looked at that and thought about how car companies worked. A car company doesn't just make the wheels, it makes the whole car, start to finish. So in 1961, in a small Italian town called Agordo, he started a company called Luxottica. And for the first 20 years, nobody paid much attention. He was just another frame maker. But quietly, he wasn't only making frames. He started buying the shops that sold them, then the brands people asked for, then the factories that made the lenses, one piece of the chain at a time. And that raises the obvious question. If you want to own an entire industry, where do you actually start? Del Vecchio's answer was clever, and it began with a name everyone already loved. The first move was to buy the brands people already trusted. In 1988, he struck a deal with Giorgio Armani, and it was a genuinely clever idea. Armani makes clothes. They don't want to mess about manufacturing spectacle frames. So Luxottica said, in effect, let us make the glasses, put your name on them, and we'll pay you for the privilege. The fashion house gets money for doing almost nothing. Luxottica gets to sell the same frame with a prestigious name on the arm at a much higher price. And once that worked with Armani, the queue formed. Prada, Versace, Chanel, Burberry, Ralph Lauren, Dolce & Gabbana, one after another. All these houses you think of as rivals, all making their glasses through the same Italian company. Then, in 1999, Luxottica bought Ray-Ban outright, the most recognizable sunglasses brand in the world. Aviators, Wayfarers, Tom Cruise and Top Gun, for around $640 million. It had been struggling under its previous owner. Luxottica bought it and turned it back into an icon. So picture what that means on the shelf. You're looking at 10 different brands, 10 different price tags. 80 pounds, 150, 350. And a large share of them are, underneath, coming from the same place. You think you're choosing between companies. You're mostly choosing between labels. But owning the brands only gets you so far, because there's still a problem. If someone else owns the shop, they can hide your product on the bottom shelf. So the next move was bigger. He went after the shelves themselves. Through the 90s and early 2000s, Luxottica went on a buying spree, but this time for shops. Lens Crafters, Sunglass Hut, Pearl Vision, Target Optical, enormous retail chains with thousands of stores between them. So now the picture changes completely. When you walk into a Sunglass Hut thinking you're comparing brands, you're standing inside a shop the same company owns, looking at brands it owns or licenses, on a display it designed, at prices it set. The staff, the shelves, the labels, all one company. You feel like you're shopping around. Really, you've just walked deeper into the same building. And there's a small detail here I find genuinely funny in a bleak way. You know the badges? Top pick? Recommended? A lot of the time, that's not the frame with the best reviews. It's just the one the company most wants to sell you that week. If this is doing something to your view of the high street, a like helps it reach more people, and you can subscribe if you want more of these. Right, back to it. Because there was a third move, And this is the one that turns a big company into something closer to a closed loop. In 2018, Luxottica merged with a French company called Essilor. And Essilor is the biggest lens maker in the world. So now the same company doesn't just own the frames in the shops, it makes the lenses that go in them too, which would already be a lot. But there's one more piece, and it's the one that made me stop and reread it. Essilor also owned a major vision insurance company, which means the same corporation can be involved in the insurance that helps pay for your glasses, the eye test, the shop you're sent to, the frame you choose, and the lens inside it. Follow that all the way through. You get your eyes tested. Your insurance, same corporate family, covers part of the cost. It sends you to a shop it owns. You pick frames it makes, fitted with lenses it makes. And at every single step, quietly, the money is flowing back toward the same place. That's not a company that sells glasses. That's a company that owns the whole road you walk down to buy them. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, fine, they're big, they're everywhere. But do they actually play dirty? Or did they just build something impressive and win fair and square? There's one story that answers that. And it's the moment a rebel brand tried to say no. Oakley. If you don't know the brand, you'd recognize the look. Wraparound sports sunglasses. The ones worn by cyclists and skiers and fighter pilots. It was founded by a man named Jim Gennard, who started out selling motorcycle grips out of the boot of his car. Oakley was the rebel, independent, a bit edgy, proudly not part of the establishment. In the early 2000s, Luxottica had just bought Sunglass Hut, at the time the biggest sunglasses retailer around, and Luxottica leaned on its suppliers to lower their wholesale prices. Oakley's founder refused. So Luxottica did something ruthless. It pulled Oakley out of its shops. Sunglass Hut, Lens Crafters, the lot. Overnight, one of the biggest sunglasses brands in the world lost access to the biggest places that sold sunglasses. Oakley's share price fell by around a third. The company that had just been cut off from its own customers suddenly looked a lot weaker. And then Luxottica came back, with an offer to buy it. In 2007, Oakley sold for around $2.1 billion. And here's the part that tells you everything. Once Oakley was theirs, Luxottica put it straight back on the very shelves it had just been banished from. Same brand, same shops, now on the same side. Which is the whole strategy in one story. Luxottica never really needed to beat its competitors. It just needed to own them. Ray-Ban, Oakley, Persol, Prada. They can compete on style all they like. It doesn't matter which one you pick. They were all going to be sold to you by the same company. So let's talk about what this does to the price. And I'll be honest about the numbers, because this is the part people exaggerate. By most estimates, a pair of glasses, frames and lenses, cost somewhere in the region of 10 to 15 pounds to actually manufacture. Not the cheap ones, the designer ones. And you might pay 200, 300, 400 pounds for them. Now some of that gap is real. Retail rent, staff, marketing, the eye test, shipping, none of that is free. But a markup that large isn't mainly about cost. It's about competition, or the lack of it. When one company has a hand in the brands, the manufacturing, the shops, and the lenses, there simply isn't much pressure pushing the price back down. There's no rival forcing a price war, because so many of the rivals are, underneath, the same company. And I should be fair here, because this is where a lot of videos overreach. You'll hear that this company controls 80% of the eyewear market. That figure is disputed. Its share of the whole global market is genuinely argued about, and by some measures, it's far lower. Where it really dominates is the premium, branded end, and the fact that it owns so much of the chain at once, which is quite enough to shape what you pay. So does it matter? The glasses work. They sit on your face. Who cares? Here's why I think it does. When one company has this much control, there's little pressure to make things cheaper, or better, or more honest about what you're paying for. Things that cost a tenner to make don't sell for 300 in a healthy, competitive market. They do it in this one. There are challengers now. Companies selling you glasses directly online for a fraction of the high street price. But the giant has noticed, and it started launching its own direct brands to compete. The challengers are climbing a hill, and the company they're climbing toward owns the hill. So here's all I'll ask. Next time you buy glasses, look at the name on the arm, and then look up who actually owns it, and tell me in the comments what you find, the brand you're wearing right now, and whether you had any idea. I'd genuinely like to know how many of us thought we were choosing.